Canada's unexpected Arctic radar and submarine surge bypasses Trump's Arctic plan. There was no dramatic announcement from Washington, no emergency briefing, no press conference acknowledging that a major strategic shift had quietly unfolded in the Arctic. Yet beneath the ice, beneath the radar, quite literally the balance of power in the far north has begun to change. Canada, long viewed as a cautious and measured Arctic player, has accelerated a sweeping expansion of radar surveillance, undersea detection systems, and submarine capability across its northern frontier. The move did not mirror Washington's Arctic ambitions. It did not align with earlier US proposals, and it did not wait for American leadership. Instead, it bypassed it. At a time when the Arctic is emerging as one of the most strategically contested regions on Earth, Canada has moved faster, deeper, and more decisively than many expected, reshaping North American security in ways that challenge assumptions formed during the Trump era and beyond. This is not just a defense upgrade. It is a strategic recalibration. Tonight, we examine how Canada's Arctic radar and submarine surge is quietly rewriting the rules of Arctic power, why US plans struggle to keep pace, and what this shift means for the future of North American security, global trade routes, and great power rivalry. The Arctic is no longer remote for much of modern history. The Arctic was treated as a frozen buffer, vast, inhospitable, and largely inaccessible. Distance was protection, ice was defense. That era is ending. Climate change has reduced ice cover, opening sea lanes that were once impassable. Technological advances have made under ice navigation routine rather than exceptional. Long-range missiles, stealth submarines, and satellite-guided systems have collapsed the meaning of distance. The Arctic is no longer the edge of the map. It is the center of a new strategic equation. Shipping routes through the Arctic promise to cut weeks off global trade journeys. Undersea fiber optic cables and energy corridors are expanding, and militaries increasingly view the region as a launch corridor rather than a barrier. For North America, this shift carries particular weight. The shortest flight path for intercontinental missiles between Eurasia and North America runs directly over the Arctic. Submarines operating beneath the ice can approach undetected. Early warning time is measured in minutes, not hours. Control of the Arctic is not symbolic, it is existential. The Trump-era Arctic vision during Donald Trump's presidency. Washington began paying renewed attention to the Arctic. The region was increasingly framed as a zone of competition with Russia and China. Policy documents spoke of Arctic dominance. Military planners emphasized freedom of navigation. Proposals emerged for expanded U.S. naval presence, icebreaker fleets, and infrastructure investments. But the strategy faced constraints. Funding cycles moved slowly. Political focus shifted between crises. Arctic infrastructure projects proved expensive and complex. Coordination with allies lagged behind rhetoric. Most importantly, the US approach relied heavily on projection, the idea that American presence could be extended northward when needed. Canada, however, viewed the Arctic differently. For Ottawa, the Arctic is not an extension, it is home territory. Canada's strategic reassessment. Canada has long claimed sovereignty over vast Arctic regions, including the Northwest Passage, but for decades, critics argued that claims outpaced capability. That calculation has now changed. Rather than focusing on surface presence alone, Canada prioritized situational awareness, the ability to see, hear, and track activity across its northern approaches in real time. This shift led to an accelerated investment in three critical areas: advanced Arctic radar systems, MIDE undersea detection and surveillance, operational upgrades together. These elements form an integrated security architecture designed not for visibility but for control. The radar wall in the north, at the heart of Canada's Arctic move, is a sweeping modernization of its northern radar network. Traditional radar systems were built for a different era, one where threats were high-altitude aircraft or predictable missile trajectories. Today's threats are stealthier, lower flying, and more complex. Canada's new approach emphasizes over-the-horizon radar, capable of tracking objects thousands of kilometers away. Low-altitude detection optimized for cruise missiles and hypersonic threats, or networked systems integrated with satellites, aircraft, and naval assets. This creates something far more powerful than individual radar stations. It creates persistent awareness. Rather than reacting to incursions, Canada's Arctic defense posture is increasingly designed to anticipate them. This matters because in modern conflict, detection is deterrence. The silent domain beneath the ice, while radar dominates the headlines. The most consequential shift may be happening underwater. Submarines are the Arctic's most powerful and most dangerous assets. They move unseen, they strike without warning. And in the Arctic, they can disappear beneath ice that shields them from conventional tracking. Canada has invested heavily in improving undersea detection across key Arctic choke points. This includes acoustic monitoring, sensor arrays, and integration with allied intelligence systems. The objective is not to flood the Arctic with ships, it is to deny invisibility. By improving the ability to detect and track submarines moving through northern waters, Canada strengthens its control over access routes to North America. This quietly alters the strategic balance. Submarines, from presence to persistence, Canada's submarine fleet has often been underestimated. Critics focused on numbers rather than mission, but in Arctic warfare, quantity matters less than positioning and endurance. Canada's focus has shifted toward extended under ice operational capability, improved communications in extreme environments, integration with Arctic surveillance network. Submarines are no longer viewed simply as patrol assets. They are sensors, deterrents, and intelligence platforms. This approach allows Canada to maintain continuous presence without visible escalation. In geopolitical terms, it is a classic asymmetric advantage. Why this bypasses the US plan. The key difference between Canada's Arctic surge and earlier US strategy lies in control versus projection. The US approach emphasized the ability to deploy forces into the Arctic. Canada focused on owning the environment itself. Radar coverage does not require fleets. Undersea sensors do not need port access. Submarines operating under ice do not broadcast their presence. By the time external forces arrive, the informational battle is already decided. This effectively places Canada at the center of Arctic decision-making, regardless of who else enters the region. It also complicates unilateral action. Any Arctic operation near North America increasingly passes through Canadian awareness systems first. The Russia factor. No discussion of Arctic security is complete without Russia. Russia maintains the largest Arctic military presence in the world. Its northern fleet, missile bases, and ice-capable vessels dominate large sections of the region. But Russian strategy depends heavily on the assumption that Arctic approaches remain opaque. Canada's surveillance expansion challenges that assumption. Enhanced detection reduces strategic ambiguity. It compresses decision time. And it increases the cost of miscalculation. This does not escalate tensions openly, but it shifts the calculus quietly. And then there is China. China is not an Arctic state, but it is increasingly an Arctic act. Described as a near-Arctic power, Beijing has invested in polar research, ice-capable vessels, and Arctic infrastructure partnerships. Its interest is economic and strategic. Shorter trade routes, energy access, influence in emerging governance frameworks. Canada's move signals that access to Arctic corridors will not be neutral or unmonitored. The Arctic is not an open frontier. It is regulated, observed, and defended. A Canada-US recalibration. This shift does not weaken the US-Canada alliance, but it does rebalance it. For decades, North American defense relied heavily on US technological dominance. Canada's role was often described as complementary. That relationship is evolving. Canada's Arctic investments enhance continental defense while asserting national leadership in its northern domain. This creates a more equal partnership, one where Canada is not waiting for US initiative, but shaping the strategic environment directly. It also introduces new coordination challenges. When one partner moves faster than the other, alignment must be renegotiated. Why this matters beyond the Arctic, the implications extend far beyond ice and radar stations. The Arctic is becoming a corridor for military transit, Dnipro global trade energy flows, Dnipro global trade energy flows, Dnipro global controls, awareness controls access. Canada's strategy prioritizes information dominance, a model increasingly favored in modern geopolitics. Rather than contesting space openly, states seek to shape environments invisibly. This is what makes the Arctic surge so consequential. The political dimension, unlike more visible defense moves, Canada's Arctic expansion has unfolded without inflammatory rhetoric. There were no victory speeches, no public challenges, no direct confrontations. This quiet approach reduces escalation risk while delivering real capability. It also reflects a broader trend in modern power politics, influence exercised without spectacle. The Trump factor revisited Trump's Arctic vision emphasized strength, presence, and symbolism. Canada's approach emphasizes systems, endurance, and integration. Neither approach is inherently flawed, but in the Arctic, patience often outperforms projection. By the time visibility matters, control has already been established. What happens next, looking ahead? Several trajectories are likely: increased Arctic coordination among allies, or greater emphasis on surveillance and detection over force projection, or more competition beneath the surface than above it. Canada's move sets a precedent. Arctic power will belong not to those who arrive first, but to those who see first. A quiet strategic shift history rarely announces itself with sirens. Sometimes it unfolds through procurement decisions, infrastructure upgrades, and technical integration far from headlines. Canada's Arctic radar and submarine surge is one such moment. It does not dominate the news cycle, but it reshapes the map. By the time the Arctic becomes the center of global attention, the strategic groundwork may already be complete. And in that future Arctic silent, monitored, and increasingly contested, Canada will not be waiting for direction. It will already be watching.